Okay, so I'm going to be doing a video on why I need a hysterectomy. I'm trying to keep my emotions out of it, and I'm trying to make it precise and just a simple thing that you can come and watch whenever you need to know more about what I'm talking about in other videos. So I'm going to try to keep it quick and simple, but I've got brain fog, so bear with me. Also, my nose is aggravating the living crap out of me, so I apologize for scratching it. I'm trying not to, but it itches so bad. My allergies are just awful this time of year. I have this list, and I'm going to be reading off the list, and it's in different, I guess, sections. So it's quality of life, well-being of my children, and can I physically carry a child? Okay, so I cannot tolerate my periods, and so because of that, I have an IUD, and I don't tolerate my IUD well, let alone any other birth control. So my option is I don't have the hysterectomy and I keep the IUD along with all the complications it causes, or I have the hysterectomy. And some of the complications that the IUD causes is more cysts. It's also not recommended for people with immune disorders, and I have a condition called hypogammaglobulinemia. The IUD increases chance of PID, which is pelvic inflammatory disease, and I think it was last year I actually got PID. I might be wrong on the timing, but I think it was last year. And when I first got the IUD, I was 17, and we did not know I had an immune disorder at that time. And so I don't know if they would have put it in, but at that time, if they knew, but I'm not a good candidate for the IUD. It's actually recommended that I do not have the IUD. Because I'm so used to chronic pain, I assumed that the infection was something that a flare of something I already had, and so I waited a long time. I keep having to stop to scratch my nose. But by the time I got to the hospital and was being treated, my cyst, not the cyst, but my ovary, I keep saying cyst, I mean ovary. My ovary was so big they thought it was appendicitis at first. It was had to be pretty big and a bad infection. And it took a lot to get rid of it because they gave me oral antibiotics when I told them they needed to give me IV, and they didn't. And so I ended up having to get several injections later on of antibiotics, and I did end up having to get some IV antibiotics too. It took a long time to get rid of the infection. Another thing is that I have incontinence, and so I'm in a diaper, and I also have IC. So with the immune disorder that I have, the diaper and the IC, I'm just way over the risk, the is a healthy risk even a thing? A healthy risk for even having the IUD. The only reason they gave it to me is because there really is no other option besides a hysterectomy regarding keeping me comfortable when it relates to periods and stuff. And as for my periods, the reason they are so bad is because of most likely having endometriosis. If I don't have endometriosis, and I can't tell you why my periods are so bad, but they are awful. I'm talking 3 pads, 2 tampons all at the same time, horrible, horrible, horrible pain. I faint more because of my POTS and the blood loss. I swear, I need a new nose. Before October the 8th, this would have been said differently, because my IUD has to be put in through with sedation. My uterus is tilted forwards. I thought it was tilted backwards, but it's actually tilted forwards, which is common, but because of it, it's hard to get the IUD in, and so they have to grab my cervix and pull it down to try to get it to meet with the uterus. Because if this is the cervix and the uterus is kind of like this, it's, you got to pull it to get it to match and flow to get the IUD in. And when they did that last time, they tried to put it in the office, they had to take a clamp and put it on my cervix. And if you're squeamish, you might want to skip this. I'm not going to be too graphic, but basically they ripped my skin off of my cervix and they had to cauterize it in office. So because of that, it's just safer to do it in a OR, but also for pain wise, they need me to be out because it is so painful to do it. Even if that didn't happen, it is still extremely painful to have an IUD placed. The reason this would have been a different conversation before the 8th is because they actually found a medication to help me wake up from anesthesia without having a huge tic attack. I have very violent tic attacks when I'm waking up from anesthesia, and my neurologist found a medication to basically takes that away. And so previously, before that, I would have been having the argument basically where it's very hard on my body to have to go through anesthesia every 5 years, on top of any other things that I need to do in between that time, because of how hard the tic attacks are on my body. I can hurt myself and I can hurt others, and it's not even I do. Granted, if I don't get the hysterectomy, I still have to go through a sedation every 5 years, which is not great, and that is a reason to consider. That is another reason to consider for getting the hysterectomy. It's not as bad as it would have if we hadn't found this medication, basically. And then there's also like the PTSD related issues, which is not too big on my list, but it is there. I think I talked about this earlier. It could have been on another clip that I deleted, but my medical conditions spiked close to when I got my first IUD placed. So I do not think that my IUD caused my medical conditions. Obviously, they're genetic, but I do think that they have probably made them a little worse. Granted, I can't really completely confirm that, I guess, because, it does make sense for my medical conditions to get worse when they did. It's very common. But I do think my birth control does play a role in that. That is obviously a reason to get the hysterectomy so that I can get off birth control. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I have tried other types of birth control. I've tried the shot. I've tried the ring. They do not want to do the implant. I think it's the Nexplanon is what you call it. With my EDS, I don't react well to local anesthetic, and I'm afraid that it's going to kind of float around a little bit too much and get lost, which has happened with people with EDS before. I can't remember what I just said like 2 seconds ago, but I don't handle the birth control well because of mood swings to the point where they make me suicidal, and then just side effects like cystic acne and just not tolerating the medication well. I don't know how to explain it, but I do not tolerate meds well at all. And I just don't tolerate birth control well. The only reason I kept my IUD is because the issues I have with my IUD are less than the issues I have without having any birth control at all. If I did not have birth control at all, I would probably be begging someone to do a hysterectomy on me. And part of me still is, but I think it would be more of it would be more out of distress than anything. It would be less of a logical, rational decision and more of like, I am being shot constantly, stop shooting me, please make it stop shooting me type of thing, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it should. Pap smears are traumatic, and I would never have to do one again if I had a full hysterectomy. And the reason being is because with a full hysterectomy, they take out your cervix along with it. And so I would never have to go through the trauma and pain of a pap smear anymore, and that would be amazing. I think this belongs in the quality of life, but it could be like because quality of life would be the same as my well-being. I have something called keratosis congenita. It is a genetic condition, and unfortunately, there is not a lot known about it, simply because it's just rare. But I also don't have 2 copies. I have 1. I am slowly turning into Rudolph. My God. With DC, there is an increased risk of cancer, and the cancer is mostly head, neck, and genitals. My doctor did say that cervical cancer would fall in line of genital cancer. There are some studies that shows that out of like 35 patients, there was only 1 person with cervical cancer, so they're saying that it's really not that high of a risk for cervical cancer, but there's not that many people with DC, and so the study was with a very small amount of people. Basically, it didn't really give me any comfort. It would basically make me feel better if I didn't have to worry about cervical cancer or ovary cancer, and so I haven't really brought it up to him, but I would like, if I had a hysterectomy, I would like him to take my fallopian tubes too. I obviously leave my ovaries if they're healthy enough. But the reason I want him to take my fallopian tubes is because they have realized that a lot of the times ovarian cancer is caused by the fallopian tubes, not by the ovaries themselves. So basically, peace of mind relating to cancer risks due to my DC. And again, I'm kind of wonky on this one because I only have one copy, and I think 4 or 5 years ago at this point, they would have assumed that I was not affected by that one copy, but I am. So most of the stuff is based on 2 copies. So I have to make a decision based on what they know about the 2 copies, when it could be different for me. It could be worse. It could be, not as bad. I don't really know. So the next one is, it says, while I understand it's not a cure for endo, I think it would make me feel better in the long run and take stuff off my plate. So what I mean by that is that getting a hysterectomy is not a cure for endometriosis. I could still have endometriosis because even if they did excision, it could still come back because endo is triggered by your hormones. So when you leave your ovaries, you still have a 35 to a 50% chance, I think is what he said, for it to come back, related just to me based on my comorbidities and my medical crap. I don't know about normal, healthy people that just end up having endo. But for me specifically, I think he said it was 35 to 50% chance still. Can't remember exactly, but I think that's accurate. So while it won't cure the endo, it'll get rid of the birth control. I won't have to have a procedure every 5 years. I won't have to deal with pap smears. I will not have to be on birth control anymore, which, I can't even imagine what the benefits of that would be. I might feel better emotionally. I could feel better physically. I don't know. I would think I'd feel better in a lot of areas. My last one for quality of life is a hysterectomy, in my opinion, is in my future no matter what. I would rather it be sooner than later so that I can benefit from it for as long as possible. And now with well-being of children, this area is a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about, but it is relevant, so I'm going to try to do it to my comfort level. So I obviously don't want to pass on my genetic diseases, and this is a guaranteed way to prevent that. Another thing is I don't think that I could take care of a child without a lot of support from others, and even with support from others, I really don't think I could do it. Especially not in a way that would be healthy for the child. I don't want my emotions to come into play with this, but in this situation, I think I'm going to let them. I am afraid that maybe eventually one day that could change, and I will be trying to adopt or whatever and be denied based on my disabilities, either from companies, which is illegal, or by expecting mothers, which with expecting mothers, I could not stop them from not choosing me, you know what I mean? I think that's probably the only way that I would full on regret doing a hysterectomy, is if I get to a place where I can physically take care of a child, and it be positive for my well-being and their well-being, and then not be able to through adoption, because I could get over not being able to have a child physically, I think it would be very sad, but I think I could probably get over it eventually. I'm afraid, though, that I will get into a place where I can, and then my only avenue to doing that is taken away from me too. Because at the beginning of this, I felt like I was completely giving up every aspect of being a mom, and in a sense I am. But I'm also completely not, because adoption is technically there if I am in an area where I can do it. But it relies heavily on other people, and I don't trust other people, and that scares me. If I don't have a hysterectomy, I can always, be stupid and, try to get pregnant naturally. Granted, I would have all of the issues of trying to get pregnant, which, I would have to have the financial stability to undergo adopting an egg or an embryo. I would have to be able to be emotionally and mentally prepared to deal with the pain and sensory issues involved in dealing with my period long enough to get pregnant. And in order to implant an embryo, you have to go on a lot of medications and shots and injections and stuff in order to get your body ready to carry the embryo. So it's not like with most people where you just have your period and have sex naturally and get pregnant that way. I would have to get off of birth control, which again, I don't tolerate being on or off long enough to get pregnant through IVF, because I would not be having a child with my own eggs. It doesn't make sense because I can only test for the DC. I can't test for the EDS. I don't really have any drive to have a biological child. I just want a child, and so that's my fear with children. With the hysterectomy. But if we're talking about the child, I don't think that I could take care of a child physically. At least if we're talking about right now, I can't say for the future. Maybe that'll change. I don't know, and that's part of my fear, is that it will. I think logically, I don't think it will, though. There's the being up with them at night. I get so tired that it's like I'm being sedated. If a baby is crying and I am that tired, I think that is a perfect recipe for postpartum depression. And somebody would have to be with me constantly to make sure that the baby would be getting what they would be needing during that period, because there's the stress of the delivery, however that would happen, and then you have a newborn, and then even past newborn stage, most people are like, just get past the newborn stage, but you can't sit there and pretend that your child is not going to need you at night sometimes. It's basically a constant thing, kind of, because they have nightmares, or they're sick and they need you at nighttime. It's not like you get them past newborn stage and then you never have to worry about them needing you in a period of time where I'm in a flare of some sorts medically. And so I'm barely surviving right now. I know I could not take care of a kid at all right now. And so, with the well-being of a child, while I want children, I can't have children in that aspect. And so, that's sad. So we're going to go into physically carrying a child, and then I kind of want to go into and then I kind of want to talk about grief for a second. So it's basically one thing, and then several points. But I would be a high-risk pregnancy. Pregnancy is something I have longed to experience, but logical me knows I would be miserable, and it'd be very difficult and expensive to get pregnant, as I would need to adopt an egg or an embryo, like I've talked about previously. And then there's the whole IVF side of that. On top of that, I would have to find a way to deal with my periods long enough to get pregnant, which again I've talked about. I'm kind of repeating myself, and I honestly don't want to do that. But I know I'm stubborn enough to do it. So part of me is like, having a hysterectomy is a gift to myself, because it would prevent me from doing harm to myself in a sense, because I know how much I want a child. And if I was in an area where I could have a child, either I had the support I needed with how sick I am, and that would be financial and family. And I'm talking more so like partner support. I think my family would help, but there's still limitations with them because they're sick too. And so, it'd be mainly partner support. They would have to take care of a lot of the stuff, and they'd have to take care and have more responsibility because of the circumstances of how sick I am. And so part of me is like, that's selfish. I couldn't do that. But I think if somebody loved me enough, that they would. And so on one hand, I think it's a self-love act to keep me from doing something that would harm myself, like trying to push my body through a pregnancy. And I think it'd be a self-love act for my kids, because I've talked about it in other videos, and I don't know if you've heard it or not yet, but when I was 17, I tried to get pregnant, and during that time period, no, I was 16. I keep getting stuck on the age. It doesn't really matter, but I realized something, and it was based on anger at my own parents, which I don't want to get too much into, but it basically, I realized that I was angry because they didn't do certain things that I think they should have done before they had kids, like therapy and working on certain emotional things. But there's also physical things, I think, that for me specifically. And through that anger, I realized that being a good parent starts before you are a parent. And so I realized that, you know what, I'm trying to get pregnant. I'm 16 years old. I do not have the means to support this child, and probably will never have that, which I didn't completely understand that at that time, because I didn't know how sick I was going to be. But I realized that I was being very selfish in that time, trying to get pregnant. And I think that if I did have kids, at least now, with how everything is now, I can't say in the future, but with right now, it'd be very selfish. And some things that I left out is that, part of being a good parent includes taking care of yourself. And so a hysterectomy would be taking care of myself. The thing that I can't get over, though, is how to prevent my grief from keeping me from taking care of myself, and taking care of my children, because in a sense, it is a self-love act to make sure that I do not have a child if I do not have the means to keep them physically and mentally, along with myself, emotionally, physically, mentally, emotionally. I'm repeating myself, but happy and healthy and all that stuff, and preventing myself from doing harm to myself out of an intense desire to be a parent, I think is part of that. And so, it makes complete sense for me to have a hysterectomy, in my opinion. And my doctor can see that, and my therapist can see that, and some family members can see that. The thing is, though, that I have this hiccup of the grief associated with it, and figuring out how the fuck to just say, you know what, this is what I need to do. Let's do it. I'm kind of stuck, and I don't know how to get over that, and I don't know if I will be able to. But yeah, I really think that this is the best thing for me and my children, in the sense of the children that I have in my heart type of thing. I kind of skipped over something, but with complications with pregnancy that I would possibly have with the DC, it could cause bone marrow failure. Obviously, I could go in bone marrow failure at any point, but pregnancy has been known to trigger it, and they don't know if it is something that is reversed, like gestational diabetes. Hopefully I said that right. Or if it is triggered and stays that way. Obviously, there's miscarriages, which is something I have experienced that when I was in high school. And so part of me really doesn't even think that I could get pregnant. And then there's EDS related issues like prolapse, ruptures. I would assume at a dislocation, so there's going to be a baby kicking inside of you. There's stillbirths, needing an abortion later on in the pregnancy to save your life. There's a bunch of other things. Most of those things are associated with the other types of subtypes, but personally I think that the risk that they view associated with hypermobile, I don't really think it's very accurate. Obviously it's anecdotal, but there's been a lot of people that have had issues associated with other types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome online, and EDS is neglected. And so I basically think that in a few years they're going to realize that there is actually more risks than they previously thought. I can't prove that. Maybe thinking that has some irrationality into it, but I really do believe that HEDS probably has more complications than is assumed. Obviously not to the extent of like vascular, but I think that EDS is like, oh, it's just HEDS, you know? If you have vascular, obviously a doctor's going to take it more seriously because it's been proven that you are at higher risk for organ ruptures. But again, with HEDS, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you know? And I think eventually they're going to realize that was naive. I can't prove that, but I kind of honestly believe that. So if you don't believe that, that's okay. But that's just something that, even if I'm wrong, there is still a risk. It's just exactly how big is the risk type of thing. With the late-term abortions, that can also apply to the DC, because if I went into bone marrow failure, obviously I would probably choose to terminate the pregnancy to try to see if that would improve it or reverse it before it got any worse type of thing. Because if I'm going to bone marrow failure at that point, I really don't think there's a point in bringing a kid in the world with a mom that's probably going to die soon, you know? That just seems wrong. And then with my POTS, there's blood pressure issues, and it would just be a harder pregnancy because of it. And then I would have to go off some important medications. And so that would, you know, quality of life trying to get pregnant would be a big one, basically. A lot of the stuff that I can do to try to alleviate symptoms would possibly not be an option at that point anymore. Half of this video is me scratching my nose, but with that being said, those are my main reasons. That is not to be said that I'm not upset about this. I am distraught. I'm hoping that I'll eventually get to the place where I can just say, do the hysterectomy, which you'll know more about that later on with other videos. As of now, it's still not been confirmed that I'm even allowed to have a hysterectomy. With my last conversation, the doctors made it seem like it would be pretty easy for me to get approved. But I should have already received a call by now with a yay or nay regarding that. So, yeah. Again, sorry about scratching my nose a million times. But thanks for listening. Bye!